Orville and Wilbur Wright were brothers from Dayton, Ohio. They were the sons of Milton Wright, an ordained minister. From a very young age, the Wright brothers were encouraged to pursue their own intellectual interests. The curiosity for how things worked began very early for the boys. In a letter from Orville to his father in 1881, Orville recounts an experience at school in which he first encountered boiling water. He wrote about the behavior of the water and related it to other things he had previously seen. The boys were no strangers to experiments. While most people only know the Wright brothers for the triumphs in the aviation industry, that is not the career path they were always on. Orville had been working in a print shop as a young man and decided to build his own printing press. Wilbur eventually joined him in the endeavor, and the brothers began printing a paper called the West Side News. This business lasted a couple of years until the brothers were struck with a new idea. From the time they were young boys, the Wrights had been interested in constructing things, so in 1892 they opened up their own bicycle shop where they even built their own models. It was during this time that the brothers really perfected their building and crafting skills. While running the bicycle shop, the boys were inspired to explore aviation. The skills they learned from building bikes along with the profits from the shop allowed them to fund their first aviation trials. The Wright brothers' inspiration for turning to aviation can be attributed to a number of things. One of the most significant of these inspirations came from Otto Lilienthal. Lilienthal was an aviation specialist that was the first to complete a successful flight with a glider. The brothers were inspired by the idea that a man could be supported in flight and made it their mission to build a successful airplane. Once Orville and Wilbur had put together some glider models, they were in search of the perfect testing ground. They settled on Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Once settled there, the Wright brothers tested their initial gliders as kites. They had them tethered down and let them be carried by the wind to test how well they stayed up. The brothers studied birds to gain inspiration for their models. They examined the way a bird's wings are constructed and moved to carry the bird through flight. These observations led to the Wright brothers creating the concept of wing warping. Their first experiments with wing warping produced gliders that could be manipulated with pulleys to control the glider. In 1902, the Wright brothers perfected their first controlled glider. They had attached a rudder to the back that manipulated the wing warping system to control the glider. The next step was to create a machine that would carry man in flight. This victory came in 1903 with a successful flight lasting 12 seconds and traveling 120 feet. While the flight did not last long, it was the first time an airplane carried men safely. The brothers continued to work on the plane until they could produce longer and longer flights. In 1905, they produced their first practical flyer. This plane had many improvements and was the first to be fully controlled in flight. Following the first flight, many competitors began trying to outdo the Wright brothers. In order to protect their inventions, they decided to patent the idea of wing warping. They wanted to be known as the first to successfully implement this idea. After their wing warping idea was patented, the brothers began producing airplanes for sale. They wanted to expand their reach beyond just the United States, so while Orville stayed in the States to work on production and perfections to the planes, Wilbur introduced the planes overseas. People had never seen anything like this before, and the Wright brothers truly revolutionizing the aviation and transportation industries. The journey was not always an outright success, however. The mechanisms built into the planes had to be perfected, and during that process there was a casualty. During a flight Orville piloted in Fort Myer, the propeller failed, causing a crash in which Orville's passenger, Lieutenant Selfridge, was killed. The brothers were deeply saddened by the event and worked extra hard to ensure it did not happen again. Wilbur finally finished his tour overseas and returned to the United States, where the duo was reunited. They continued to sell their planes, becoming extremely successful businessmen. Wilbur Wright eventually fell ill and died on May 30th, 1912 of typhoid fever. Orville finished out his life serving on a number of aviation committees until dying of a heart attack on January 30th, 1948. Orville and Wilbur Wright were incredible men who achieved a feat some thought may never have been possible.